What's the worst pain a human can endure and still live to tell the tale? Now imagine it happening in a pitch-black cave, hundreds of feet underground, with no way out except through sheer willpower. Welcome back to CJ Uncovers, the place where we dig into the darkest, most terrifying survival stories you've probably never heard before. And today, we're talking about the most brutal cave injuries ever recorded. Stories of crushed bones, mangled bodies, and survival against the odds. Once you hear these, you'll never look at caves the same way again. Story 1. 2004. Wales, United Kingdom. The Shattered Leg. It was Easter weekend, 2004, when a man named Lloyd and his group descended into a cave system in Wales, UK. The passages were narrow, jagged, and slippery from underground streams. At one point, Chris slipped on wet limestone and fell almost 30 feet into darkness. The sound of his landing wasn't just a thud. It was the crack of bones snapping under his own body weight. His leg was shattered, twisted at an unnatural angle, with the bone nearly piercing through his skin. Down there, in the cold silence, every second felt like death was inching closer. Rescue teams couldn't just walk in. It took over 400 people working in shifts, crawling through tight tunnels, drilling, and carrying him out on a stretcher. The operation lasted 2 grueling days, all while Chris drifted in and out of consciousness, fighting infection, hypothermia, and shock. It became one of the largest cave rescues in British history. And the terrifying part? If he had landed slightly differently, he would have snapped his spine instead of his leg, and no one would have ever gotten him out alive. Imagine lying in freezing water, leg snapped in two, knowing that help might not reach you for 48 hours. Could you stay calm? Story 2. 2018. Thailand. The broken spine. Not every cave injury comes from exploration. In 2018, a young man named Noparat in rural Thailand entered a cave to shelter from heavy rain. He slipped on a slope inside the cave, tumbling hard and fast down into an unseen crevice. The fall left him paralyzed from the waist down, his spine fractured. Alone, in complete darkness, unable to move his legs, he screamed until his voice gave out. Hours turned into days. His family found his motorcycle parked outside the cave and realized something was wrong. When rescuers reached him 5 days later, he was severely dehydrated, his lips cracked, body covered in bruises, and insects crawling across his skin. But here's the chilling detail. He survived by drinking dirty cave water dripping from stalactites above him. The horror wasn't just his injury. It was the fact that he was conscious the entire time, trapped inside his own useless body, waiting to be found, or die alone in the dark. Story 3. 2007 Mexico. The crushed chest. In 2007, a group of friends explored the Quetzalan cave system in Mexico. Among them was a young man named Ernesto. While squeezing through a narrow limestone tunnel, a rock slab suddenly collapsed on top of him, pinning his chest against the cave floor. The impact broke several ribs instantly, one of them puncturing his lung. Each breath was shallow, wheezing, and filled with blood. His friends tried lifting the slab, but it weighed hundreds of pounds. Every second Ernesto stayed trapped, his lung filled with more fluid. For over 20 hours, he lay there in pitch darkness, fighting not to suffocate. The rescue team eventually used hydraulic equipment to lift the rock and drag him out. By the time he reached the hospital, his skin had turned blue from lack of oxygen. Doctors later said his survival was nothing short of a miracle. But Ernesto described the most haunting part himself. I could hear my chest crack with every breath. It felt like I was drowning inside my own body. Story 4. 2009. New Zealand. the skull split open. In 2009, a group of adventurers entered a little-known cave system in New Zealand. One of them, a young woman named Rachel, slipped during a rope descent. Her helmet cracked on impact, and the sharp edge of the limestone split her scalp open, leaving bone exposed. Blood poured down her face, dripping onto the rocks. But she stayed conscious, barely. Her friends had to hold her head together with strips of torn clothing while crawling for hours toward the exit. The chilling part? Rachel said later that in the darkness, she could hear her blood dripping louder than their voices, each drop echoing like a ticking clock counting down her life. Against all odds, she made it out, stitched up after emergency surgery, left with a scar that still runs across her skull. She survived, but she said caves never felt like adventure again. They felt like tombs. If these stories shook you, imagine how many more are hidden, untold, in the world's caves. Hit that like button if you want me to cover more real survival horrors, and don't forget to subscribe. CJ Uncovers out.